Missed by the local and national news over the events in Washington, D.C. this week is that this is the first time that we've been here in history. Citizens invading the Capitol building? No, but in 1786, some of the same ideas played out and were the catalyst for a sea change. Will that happen this week? We're too soon to really tell. Now, there are historians who say that history doesn't repeat itself, but that sometimes it rhymes. So let's look for the repeats and the codas in this event. Now, the comparisons between the two events are strikingly similar. Both events had a situation where people felt that the promises made to them by the government were not being fulfilled, and that the government was no longer working in the best interest of the people. And both of these incidents saw people trying to do stuff to stop government from fulfilling its duties. The year 1786. Not ringing a bell? Well, it's not surprising because this is something easily glossed over in the history classrooms and sometimes is only minorly talked about in history books. So what's the comparison event? It's called Shays' Rebellion. Still not triggering your high school history memory banks? Well, let's take a quick look. Daniel Shays was a soldier in the Continental Army, and he served with distinction, and he served in some of the battles that you might remember from your history classes. Shays, though, wasn't being paid because many of the soldiers weren't being paid. They were given a promise, though. That promise was that they would be paid a pension for their service in the Army. Shays left the Army in 1780 to return home, and he found out that, as many people, as a farmer, he had borrowed money and found himself in debt, and of course is unable to make payments because he's not working as a farmer, he's working as a soldier. But the courts had sued him for non-payment of his debts, and his property was at risk of being foreclosed. And he soon found out that he was not the only one that this was happening to. And that struck many people at a time of war or our soldiers who would serve as being unreasonable and not fulfilling a promise that was kept to them. So Shays and others formed a mob, and they went to the courthouse and they went to overtake that courthouse to stop them from fulfilling their duties, which is to oversee the proceedings to foreclose on people's property and take them from them. And they were successful in that. And this happened throughout Massachusetts and other communities as well, where courthouses were overtaken for a period of 6 months. Courts can't meet, courts can't foreclose on people's property. So it was an effective and a short-term situation. The governor of the state had no other help because the national government at this point in time had been hamstrung. The first document for governing this country, the Articles of Confederation, didn't really give the national government much power to do anything, let alone really have its own standing army. So there was no way to really put down any revolution that was happening within with the people and the mobs that had overtaken the courthouse. The national government wasn't coming to help. So state militias had to be sent in to put down the revolution. The governor of the state, in doing so, may have been justified, but he was so unpopular that he's going to lose the next election he faces over the actions that he did. So do we repeat ourselves in 2021, or are we just rhyming? Well, there are a few strains that sound familiar, but we're not really even rhyming as fully as we did with Shays' Rebellion. So the promises that weren't kept, well, that's a little bit dubious. The President of the United States claims that the election was stolen from him, but there is no proof of that. All 50 states, the court system, and over 60 court cases, all these things have shown that the election was conducted faithfully and truthfully in the country. That group of people doesn't feel that the government worked for them. That is an opinion, but it's not really shared by as many people as they would like to believe. So both groups felt the government wasn't working in their best interests. With Shays, there was a widespread belief that the government was not able to react to the situation, that there was things that went wrong, and we need to try to fix that. What happens after what happened this past week in modern times is yet to be determined, but are we looking at major government changes from it? That's really unlikely. That doesn't seem to be the purpose. But the objectives of both, and here's where the rhyme comes in, the objectives of both were the same: to try to shut down government and stop it from doing its business. Now, in Shays' case, it worked for 6 months, but in the case of the mob at the Capitol this week, it was for only 6 hours, and that same night, the election results were certified and concluded. Now, there will be more aftershocks to the events that happened this week, and what happens from them, the tremors that will react from those will still be far-reaching, but ultimately what happens from this is still yet to be determined.